Hey y'all, so what we're looking into today is what is a vignette. If by the end of the lesson you can do these two things, you will have succeeded. If you can define and identify the elements of a vignette, and if after reading a vignette you can analyze them for the author's choices in crafting a compelling vignette, that is success. So basically, put in other words, if you can identify the choices the author made in order to make their vignette compelling or interesting or exciting or suspenseful, that is what we want to do. So here's what the whole reason we're doing this is eventually, in a day or two, you're going to start writing your own vignettes. And these are the 6 prompts that I am offering to you. If you come up with something different, that'd be great too. But the 6 include, just to kind of get your brain warmed up, you could write about an object related to a place, you could write about a decision, you could write about a neighborhood or a place, an event, a person, or a moment of laughter. So if you want to kind of preview what's coming down the road, you can pause here and take a closer look at the description of each vignette prompt. What we're going to do next is we're going to get into a few. So what is a vignette? We're going to pivot to our guided notes now. What you see on your paper is going to look almost identical to what you see on the screen. And what I've done is I've given you kind of these fill in the blank or guided notes so you can really focus your energy more on making sense of the information than copying every single word down. So for this next portion, what I'd love for you to do is complete your guided notes and then also add any details that are going to help you and the way you learn remember these elements of a vignette. So here's a definition of a vignette. It's a brief evocative description or account of a place, person, object, event, or idea. So you might find yourself wondering, what the heck does evocative mean? It's just a fancy word for something we all know pretty well. Evocative just means something that brings up a strong image, memory, or feeling. So, put another way, a successful vignette brings out at least one of these elements in the reader: a strong image, a strong memory, or a strong feeling. And it could be about a lot of different topics. It could be about a place, like your grandma's house, or it could be about a person that was particularly kind or cruel to you. It could be about an object in your home that has special significance. It could be about an event like a first kiss or your first concert. And it could even be about an idea. So here's what makes a vignette a vignette. If you're like me, you don't like rules, especially around writing. So unlike poetry, where there's lots of structures and rules, vignettes are very free form, and I hesitate to even call these rules. They're just kind of like guidelines for what most vignettes are. And here goes. First, they're short and focused. They're never more than 2 scenes. They get right to the point. They usually stay in one place. It's just kind of one moment in time. We're not talking about days and weeks here. We're talking about minutes and hours. Next, they focus on only 2 things: your topic and an emotion. So the topic is what it is that you're writing about: the place, the person, the object, the event, or the idea. And then the emotion is what are you trying to get the reader to think or to feel or to see. Lastly, there's not a traditional plot needed. So you might remember like graphs like this from previous English classes where there's like you introduce your characters here, and then there's some rising action, and then there's a climax, and then there's some resolution right here. That's not needed right now. What you can do in your vignette is your vignette could be just the rising action. Your vignette could be just the climax and the falling action. It doesn't have to follow the traditional arc of the story where you're introducing the characters and describing what they look like and all that stuff. That's not important in a vignette. The most important thing is you get right to the point with what you're going to learn about next. So in other words, a vignette is a descriptive sketch. It's a glimpse of a single moment in time. It's a snapshot. It's, to the best extent that you can, it's a picture painted with words. So here's an example of what a vignette topic might look like. This is a Holocaust memorial in Berlin, Germany, that I had the privilege to visit when I was in college. So it's a physical memorial, but not like a statue and a plaque. It's an entire city block that's dedicated to the millions of victims that died in the Holocaust. And here's what it is. It's all these giant towers, and they're all set above your eye level. So when you're in it, you can't see over the towers. Also, when you're in it, the towers are not in a straight line, so you oftentimes can't see out when you're in the center. More, the ground isn't level. I don't know if you can kind of see in this photo, the ground's kind of like wavy, so it gives you this feeling you're always disoriented, you're off balance, you're kind of confused, and you're alone. And this, in my opinion, would be such a beautiful topic for a vignette. And I could just tell the story of what that was like for me in that time, in that place. The last thing I'll add about what is a vignette is this. The most common example I think of vignettes is in TV or movies when there's a flashback. When there's a flashback, what the filmmaker is doing is they're trying to give you, the viewer, some information that you need to know, and it's got to be quick. It's right to the point. They're not telling you a whole mini story. It just jumps right in, and it gives you the information about the person or the place or the context or the situation that you need to know. And then it jumps right back into the current portion of the movie. So here's what's next. What we're going to do is we're going to read a short vignette, and we're going to be looking for images and emotions that the author is trying to convey to us. So you'll see the prompts up here are what images do you see and what does the picture in your head look like? Every reader is going to have a different picture in their head. Secondly, which emotions come to mind? So which emotions does this draw up for you? So in your guided notes, you have this short vignette as well, and I've spaced it out so if you are an annotator, you can circle, you can underline, you can highlight for any of these things. Pro tip, if you want, you could even do two different things. Like you could underline things that make you come up with an image, and you could circle things that bring up an emotion, or you could use two different color highlighters. Whatever you want to do, do it. But for the moment, pause this video, read silently, and annotate however you'd like for things that bring up images for you or emotions for you. Okay, so you've already read this, but I want to go through a few examples just to identify some imagery that comes to mind for me and some emotions that are evoked when I'm reading. Now this is going to be different for you, and that's okay, but I just want to kind of show you and model my thinking to you. So the first line right here, he didn't see the gun. It's so simple. I mean, it's 5 words, but I can see it in my head like it's a movie scene. I can see the camera like panning from someone holding a gun to another person with their back turned who's distracted or unaware. So that to me is just like really, really clear imagery. Then the next part, the fog, I can kind of see. I don't know where we are yet, but I've of course experienced fog in many places in my life. So I can see that fog. And then the next thing that really connects to me emotionally is this idea of like the fog muffling the shots. So it makes me think of when it snows really heavily here in the city in Denver, how everything's kind of quieter and slower. The snow's absorbing the sounds. It's almost like you're walking around with headphones on, and the pace of things is moving a little slower. So even though the story's talking about like the muffling of shots, I can connect emotionally to this like kind of quiet, slowed down version of Denver when it snows. So skipping ahead a little bit, the next thing that connects to me emotionally is the instant of shocking pain. If you've ever had an injury that wasn't expected, you know that feeling. So I fell and broke my collarbone really badly, and everything was fine, and then it wasn't. So again, even though I'm talking about a collarbone that I broke snowboarding, and this person is presumably getting shot, that's some connection that I can make. So here's another example of really clear imagery. I can't like personally connect to this one, but it's like almost a cliche movie sign of someone like falling injured, whether they're shot and their eyes are wide and their mouth's kind of like they're kind of either talking nonsense or they're trying to talk and they can't. So just 2 more quick annotations. The body was dragged to the edge over the rocky ground. It's really clear in my mind of someone just like lugging some dead weight. And then another thing that it connects to me emotionally is just this feeling of like you're so out of it that you're feeling and sensing things that aren't even true. So this kind of like, for an instant, he thought he was flying, wind rushing cool over his face, kind of makes me think of times when I've been so exhausted that I'm almost like delusional, whether that's like the end of a bike ride or like in the middle of a really long hike or run. Okay, and then the last two things I did is I added these images over here, if you notice. One I picked of like what a foggy scene in my mind looked like fog so dense that sound doesn't carry, and that's kind of the image that I chose for that, if I had to put an image to these words. And then the other image is that feeling of like loneliness and just being so isolated and alone and scared. I thought this captured that really well. All right, next are characteristics of vignettes. Like we've discussed already, the whole point of a vignette is to tell a story and evoke emotion. We do this by using language that packs in lots of details and description. We paint a picture with our words, we use lots of imagery, and then we use lots of sensory details so the reader can see and feel and smell and touch what you're describing to them. The vignette has a strong focus on thoughts and feelings. Of course, you're telling a story, but we're always going to be tying it back to the thoughts and the feelings of the narrator or the people in the story. Lastly, time, place, or perspective are often central to the story. So for example, time wasn't so important in that last story we just read, but place and perspective were. They set the scene very well of how the place and the isolation of the place really mattered. And then the perspective of each participant in the story was really highlighted in that vignette. Okay, so in a nutshell, here's what a vignette is. It's short and sweet. It gets right to the point. It's not a novel. It's not an essay. It's not even a short story. It jumps right in. It uses sensory details to get the reader to connect to what the author is trying to get them to see and to feel and to smell. Also, they're all about thoughts and feelings. So whatever story you're telling, you've got to be crystal clear about what you want your reader to feel. And lastly, vignettes are all about details and description. So I'll write detail here. It's all about painting a picture for what you want the reader to see in your story. All right, so here's the last part of our guided notes. In your own words, describe a vignette. Make sure this is in your own words. Feel free to review your notes or the video and try to do this in about 1 to 2 sentences. The next part, you'll see a Venn diagram in your notes. What I'd like you to do is use the Venn diagram to take some notes describing how a vignette is different than a short story. So obviously, you might do your vignette over here and your short story over here. These are things that are only unique to vignettes. These are things that are unique only to short stories. And then in the middle, that is where there are similarities. So for example, you might have, there's characters in a vignette and there's characters in a short story. But one example of something that might be only in short stories are like a traditional plot of rising action and climax and falling action, whereas a vignette doesn't necessarily have to have a traditional plot. So do your best on that. Shoot to have at least 3 things in each portion of your graphic organizer. So basically what that means is 3 things over here, 3 things in the middle, and then 3 things over here.